Hi everybody, thanks very much for joining me. It's Patrick McKeown here, and what I would like to discuss is the accessibility of breathing, what you can do to bring it into your everyday life. It's such a simple and tremendous tool, and for the next 30 or 40 minutes we will be going through a couple of breathing exercises, answering any questions that you have, and of course we're also talking about Black Friday. So we do have a 20% off our online instructor training both in Buteyko Clinic and in Oxygen Advantage. So if you want to become a breathing instructor, you can avail of a 20% discount. So it translates into a couple of $100, which is definitely worthwhile. So what's my take on breathing? I'm in this space for 23 years, and of course the industry has evolved tremendously since I started back in 2002. I see breathing as a tool that, number one, it's accessible. It has to be accessible. Something that you can integrate into your daily life. And in terms of Buteyko Clinic, the emphasis is on respiratory health, so people with asthma. I always said to my clients, and I've had hundreds of clients with asthma, every year from 2002, when I was working primarily with clients, I typically had 600 clients per year. I would always say to them, if you have asthma, I would expect you to have a 50% reduction of your symptoms in 2 weeks. It's not something that I said lightly. It's something that we could see over and over so we could reproduce it. The thing about the Buteyko method is that it's not like any other breathing exercises. And for respiratory health, it involves breathing in and out through the nose. It also involves decongesting your nose by simply holding your breath, making the transition to nasal breathing, and also normalizing your breathing volume. Because if you consider a condition such as asthma and other respiratory conditions, it involves narrowing of the airways. And if your airways are getting narrow, you feel that you're not getting enough air. And if you feel you're not getting enough air, you're going to breathe harder. And if you breathe harder, it feeds back into the airway narrowing. So you could try any different breathing exercises, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will help with your asthma. Because you have to look at the cycle there and you have to intervene directly. How do you break that vicious cycle? The airway narrowing feeding into dysfunctional breathing, and dysfunctional breathing feeding into airway narrowing. So if you have asthma, it's a tremendous tool, and that's all Buteyko Clinic. The other aspect about Buteyko Clinic, of course, is sleep. Sleep is now getting a huge amount of attention. We have been taping mouths since 1998, and originally we were using 3M 1-inch micropore tape, simple strip just across the mouth, pulling the lips together. And in the last 5 years, we brought out Myo tape. So if you want to improve your sleep quality, it's very important that you're breathing in and out through your nose. If you're waking up with a dry mouth in the morning, it's a red flag. And it tells you that you have your mouth open during sleep. And if you have your mouth open during sleep, there is a narrowing of the airway, quite simply because the tongue is not able to rest in the roof of the mouth. And also your mandible, your lower jaw, falls down and back, and this narrows the airway. We don't have much room for error here. If you think of your airway, you're talking about the space at the back of the nose where it meets the throat, you're talking about the space at the back of the mouth where it meets your throat, and also the throat itself. A good airway is the size of your thumb, and that's a good airway. But if you have craniofacial abnormalities like myself, with jaws that are set back, both my maxilla is set back and my mandible, and that's from years of mouth breathing. I have a crooked nose because my upper jaw is set back. So already I have a narrow airway, and I was a chronic mouth breather as a kid, as a teenager, into my early 20s, and when I started getting my mouth closed during the day and also during sleep, it made an enormous difference to my sleep quality. So just for yourselves, the Buteyko Clinic also includes sleep, and I do have a book called The Breathing Cure for Sleep, and there's an article in USA Today that was published just at the weekend specifically on that topic, and the book is cited. So for yourself, if you have snoring, if you have sleep apnea, if you have upper airway resistance syndrome, if you have insomnia, if you're just waking up feeling tired and you're not quite sure what's the cause of it, look at the Buteyko method. It could change your life. The third group of people that we work with in Buteyko is, of course, people with anxiety and panic disorder and depression and chronic fatigue, so where there's dysregulation of the nervous system. And the thing about breathing is that if you practice something like the Buteyko method, which involves breathing less air, you can literally improve blood flow to the brain. And you increase blood flow to the brain not by taking a full deep breath. because you know, and you've practiced it, that when somebody said to you, take a full deep breath, and you take this full deep breath and then you might feel lightheaded, well, that's the opposite to what we want to achieve here. Because the full deep breath can blow off too much carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is not a gas that you want to get rid of too much of. Okay, we do breathe out excess CO2, and that excess carbon dioxide is about 15% of the gas that we produce inside the body. But we do want to hold on to about 85% of it. You don't want to be breathing too much air because you blow off too much carbon dioxide, and that causes your blood vessels to narrow. So your blood circulation, and you think about this, we have 50,000 miles of blood vessels throughout the human body, throughout the body, including the heart, including the brain. We can literally influence blood circulation by changing our breathing patterns. And it's not about taking the full deep breaths. So if you're doing yoga practice, for example, and if your instructor is cueing to breathe in for 4 seconds and out for 6, or in for 5 seconds or out for 5, do that, but do it in and out through the nose, and do it silently. And then you'll get so much more out of it, because then you're targeting breathing also from a biochemical point of view. You're targeting breathing from a psychophysiological point of view. And then if you have nasal breathing with good recruitment of the diaphragm, you're targeting breathing from a biomechanical point of view. Because ultimately, if you're practicing breathing technique, surely the one fundamental aim of that breathing technique is to improve your everyday breathing patterns. So have you assessed your breathing prior to training with breathing training? As you practice the techniques and you do a follow-up maybe 4 weeks later, has your breathing improved? Because that's going to be the crux of it. Why would you practice something unless it's going to improve the underlying function? And that's where with breathing training, we want to improve everyday breathing patterns. That's Buteyko. I will get to an exercise, and I just want to talk about oxygen advantage, how it came about. So I was given courses in Ireland for persons with anxiety and panic disorder and high stress between 2010 and 2013. Ireland was not in a good place economically. There was a lot of anxiety in this country, and 3,000 people attended these short 2-hour courses throughout the country. I travelled Dublin, Cork, Limerick, also gave course in Galway, and even went as far as Belfast. 95% of the people who turned up were females. Men were not turning up. So men were not coming to a breathing practice. So it made me think, why not? Because there's something fundamentally important about the breath. But breathing doesn't always have a great name. And the reason being is because people do put stuff out there about breathing that has no foundation. It's not accessible. It's very woo-woo. And it's more about attracting attention on Instagram than it is about delivering real results to people. So I started writing the book, The Oxygen Advantage. That's bringing breathing for both mental and physical performance. That includes looking at your functional everyday breathing, but also training the brain. So you have your body component of it, which is your functional everyday breathing. You have your mind component, which is about nervous system balance, improving sleep quality, increasing blood flow to the brain, reducing rumination of the mind, training your brain to be able to hold attention. Are you able to concentrate? Are you able to hold attention? And even in the face of high pressure, can you stay composed? Our education doesn't typically train our brain. Our education system teaches us how to think. This is not the teacher's fault. This is just the education system. We are trained how to memorize, how to regurgitate, how to question, how to analyze, and how to think. So the mind is trained into a sharp analytical tool. We are trained how to think, but we are not trained how to stop thinking. We are not trained to differentiate between optimal thinking that's productive, that serves a purpose, versus rumination of the mind, which is like when the mind goes like a broken record, rehashing old events. I should have done this, I should have done that, worrying about the past, anxious about the future. All of the things that come into the mind that take a lot of our attention. In actual fact, we spend more than 50% of the time stuck in our head. And that time that we are stuck in our head has absolutely no relevance to what we are doing. So if you're doing physical training, you have to think of breathing as a tremendous tool, that when you do physical training, it's not just a training for your body. If you also bring that in terms of a breathing training, bring breathing into your physical training. you'll get so much more out of your physical training. So it's not just training for the body, but it's also a training for your breathing, and probably more important, it's a training for your mind. It's a training for your brain. So whenever you do your physical training, where is your attention? Do you have the capacity to hold your attention on one thing for a period of time? Because we have to develop that. Yes, some people naturally have tremendous attention span. These individuals are normally very successful in whatever endeavour that they do. Why? Because when they do something, they apply it with all of their attention. But it's very common that when we do something, that we get distracted, that the mind gets in the way, that our self-doubt kicks in, we procrastinate. And also we don't have a tremendous ability to make decisions. Why? Because we are constantly being distracted and bombarded with thoughts that have nothing got to do with the situation on hand. So if we think human beings, one of the most important functions of being human is cognitive function. And that's our ability to plan, make decisions and reason, and to apply ourselves to the best of our ability. But we can only do that if we can hold attention on what we are doing. So, is your brain trained? How do you develop your capacity to hold your attention? You simply work on it. And this is where breathing comes in. But it's not just about focused attention. It's not just about mindfulness, because I've worked with many people with rumination of the mind, overthinking, high stress, anxiety. But the problem was, why were they overthinking? They often had poor sleep quality, not quantity. They could spend 10 hours in bed, but they're waking up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. They're snoring heavily. They're stopping breathing during sleep. They have upper airway resistance syndrome. We need to address their sleep. They may have nervous system imbalance. They're in an increased stress response. We need to dampen the stress response and increase relaxation to bring everything into balance. If we want to access flow states, we need to have a capacity to concentrate. And if we want to be able to concentrate, we need to have the nervous system in balance. We don't want too much of a stress response, because when we go into that stress response, a fight or flight response kicks in. It's all about survival. It's not about creativity. And all the brain wants to do is get us out of the situation. So I often find it's ironic. When you really want to have an utmost capacity of the mind to make a tremendous decision, you can't, because we go into that fight or flight response. So the question I put to you is, if you get into a tricky situation, if you get into a difficult situation, can you think straight? Can you think under pressure? Do you make good decisions in that instance? Or do you have an ability to self-regulate? And it's not just about being able to deal with difficult situations easier, that things are softer, that you have a better capacity, but it's also about being able to put yourself into a challenging situation, knowing that if your stress levels do get a little too high, that you're able to self-regulate. A lot of my talks, I talk for a living obviously, for the first 20 years I worked pretty much only with clients and training instructors. Now in the last 4 years I don't work with clients so much. I still do with some, but I do a lot of instructor training, because I have that 20 years experience working with clients to bring it into instructors, to be able to show instructors this is just not a theoretical practice. This is also practical. This is all of the information that I've learned over the years that I can bring you on that journey. But I also, of course, do public speaking, because breathing is a tremendous tool for the corporate world. If you think of corporations and you think of people that are working inside there, they often have high stress. There's increased risk of burnout. They have poor sleep quality, a lot of rumination of the mind. How can you help that person in there? And to do that, we want to have a technique that's absolutely deliverable. So you can get up on stage, you can talk about how to improve blood flow to the brain, how to quieten the mind, how to improve sleep, how to improve functional everyday breathing, and also if you're going into a stressful situation, such as giving a presentation, how are you able to manage that? Can you self-regulate? That if you go into a meeting and you feel that your heart rate is just that little bit too high, are you able to bring down the heart rate? Okay, so that's the first exercise I'm going to bring you into. Now before that, if you are considering to be an instructor, we would love that you would join us. If you work primarily in health, or if you want to work primarily in teaching breathing for health, That's Buteyko Clinic. So the website there is buteykoclinic.com. But if you want to bring breathing into performance, so we're talking about athletic performance, corporate performance, first responders. So anything in terms of respiration for body, mind and sport, that's Oxygen Advantage. The website there is oxygenadvantage.com. And the code is Black Friday. So if you, let's do that one again. The code is Black20. So if you put that in as the code, you get a 20% discount off. Okay, so the next time you're going into a tricky situation and you want to stay composed, the first thing that I'm going to say is don't take the full deep breath. First of all, you're not going to be able to anyway because you don't want to give the game away. So you can imagine going into a meeting. Are you going to start sitting there or standing and doing this? What's that going to say? You know, you're almost saying to the other person, I'm uncomfortable in this situation. I shouldn't be in this situation. But you might feel stressed. Is there a tool that you can simply self-regulate in a matter of seconds? Like in terms of the interconnection between the breath and the brain, it happens very, very quickly. So whenever you think about breathing, we have a breath in and we have a breath out. And with self-regulation, the breath in is not so important. It's all in the breath out. So you're going into a tricky situation. The most important thing that we do is we tell the brain that everything is okay. So it's not that you want to go into a situation too relaxed. The thing is, you don't want to go into a situation too stressed. You don't want to go into a situation when you're in survival mode. So how do we bring down the heart rate and how do we tell the brain that we are okay? Take a soft breath in through your nose and allow a gentle and relaxed and a slow breath out. You don't have to time it. There's nothing to see. And the more you practice this in your everyday life, so whenever, for example, if you have a delay getting into your Zoom meeting or you can't get into your laptop or you're waiting on somebody or you're stuck in traffic, for example, and you're starting to feel a bit of angst, we want to be able to use that as a practice in our normal everyday life. And then when we do have a presentation or a challenging situation, it's almost like something that we can just fall back on so quickly. So let's do that again. You might even do it as I'm talking here. You're bringing your attention out of your mind and onto the breath. You're paying attention to the airflow that's coming into your nose and you're paying attention to the airflow as it's leaving your nose. Don't worry too much about the inhalation. You could take a soft breath in through your nose. I don't want you to take a full breath in. I don't see the benefit of in this instance. I would like you to take a soft breath in through your nose and then just at the top of that soft breath, bring a feeling of relaxation to the body and just allow the air to leave the body effortlessly. In other words, the ratio of the breath out to the breath in should be about 2 times longer. And it's not about timing it because what might work for one person is not necessarily going to work for another. I'm not always a great believer of breathing in for 4 seconds and out for 6 seconds because we have to question where is your everyday breathing at? How fast are you breathing anyway? So if you have somebody who is a little bit anxious, their respiratory rate at that point could be 20 breaths per minute. I don't want to bring that person from 20 breaths per minute down to 6 breaths per minute because the drop is too much. Instead, what I would like that person to do is soften their breathing relative to how they are breathing at that time. Always with the breath. We have to tailor breathing exercises according how is that person breathing. We also look at their age and of course their state of health, but in this instance here, always tailor it, how are you breathing at that time. That's all you have to think about. So again, you're going into this situation. You could be sitting outside the door. You have a job interview. You know you're going to be walking into the room in about 3 or 4 minutes. Your heart rate is beating a little bit too fast. That's survival mode. You're not going to perform at your best because your brain doesn't care about how well you do in the interview. All your brain wants to do is get you out of there. Okay, so we have to tell the brain, we're okay. There's no threat. Everything is safe around us. And I cannot think of any more direct way to tell the brain that we're safe other than our breathing. All you're doing, taking a soft breath in through your nose and a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. And the other thing about that is that you're out of your head. So you're bringing your attention out of your mind and onto the breath. Now there's less likely to have rumination. You're getting out of your own way. You're putting the critical mind aside. And that's what we want to do, because the critical mind is too slow. We want to access flow states. You have all the information. You have already done your training. You know your skill set. You know your field. The information is stored in there. So how do we get out of our own way? Take a soft breath in through the nose, and a relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. Now we could go one step past that, and let's look at how do you react in difficult situations? Do you have a tendency to go into too much of a stress response? Now, of course, with experience, challenging situations get easier. But it's also very important to look at how we're breathing with our everyday life. If I look at people coming in with anxiety or panic disorder, and they're sitting in front of me, and they're in a safe environment, and we're just having a conversation, we're just having a chat, they don't feel any threat while they're having a conversation with me. But I know by looking at their everyday breathing that their everyday breathing is continuously putting them into a fight or flight response every day. It's almost that they are teetering on the brink of symptoms, and it doesn't take much to push them over. So if your breathing pattern is a little bit fast, is a little bit high, is irregular, is often, or sometimes at least, through the mouth, if you're waking up with a dry mouth in the morning, your breathing pattern can be holding you back. And in so many ways. And probably the biggest aspect that it can be holding you back is cognitive function. I know it because I was there. I spent 25 years open mouth breathing. What does open mouth breathing do? We breathe faster. We breathe higher in the upper chest. We have irregular breathing. We feel that we're not getting enough air. Open mouth breathing is constantly telling the brain that we're under threat. There's an increased stress response there. And more recently, researchers have identified that yes, if you breathe through an open mouth, it activates regions of the brain associated with speech. And speech is noise. So if you want to quieten the mind, we have to start with breathing in and out through the nose. During rest, and also during your physical exercise, and during your sleep. So you might be saying, well, my nose is stuffy. But there are exercises to help decongest your nose. If you go in on YouTube and just put in Patrick McKeown, decongest your nose, you will find exercises there. You might say, well, I just can't do any breathing exercise because I don't feel comfortable with my breathing. That's okay. If you go in on YouTube and put in Patrick McKeown and many small breath holds, that's a tremendous exercise to help stimulate the vagus nerve and activate the relaxation response without you having really to pay attention to your breathing. And that exercise is a tremendous exercise if your head feels quite heavy. Because no matter the circumstances, and of course life throws us a curveball, life always will throw us a curveball. All it takes is a matter of time. And in that instance, we need to go easy on ourselves. We need to help ourselves. And we can help ourselves through our breathing. So for example, here's another little exercise that you can do whenever you feel a little bit of angst going on in the mind. Take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go, but breathe in through your nose, and now you're just breathing normally for about 10 or 15 seconds. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go, but breathe in through your nose and breathe normally for about 10 to 15 seconds. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go, but breathe in through your nose. Breathe normally for about 10 to 15 seconds. So that's an exercise that you could consider as an emergency exercise. If you feel that your airways are a little bit tight, if you have, say for example, a tendency towards asthma or bronchoconstriction, do small breath holds. As you hold your breath, nitric oxide accumulates in your nasal airway. As you let go, you carry that nitric oxide laden air into your lungs. Nitric oxide helps to open up the airways. It helps to open up the blood vessels in the lungs. It helps to sterilise the incoming air, and it helps with easier breathing. But it's not just nitric oxide. carbon dioxide also will act as a bronchodilator. So when you hold your breath for 5 seconds, there's a slight accumulation of carbon dioxide in your lungs, which in turn will help to open up the airways. So you can literally open up the airways in your lungs by doing different breathing exercise, but they don't involve taking full deep breaths. Full deep breaths or hyperventilation will aggravate airway narrowing. Hyperventilation causes airways to constrict. Hyperventilation causes blood vessels to constrict. Hyperventilation causes less oxygen to be delivered throughout the body. Hyperventilation is a stressor. Controlled hyperventilation, of course, as an exercise serves a purpose. But what about your everyday breathing? So if you are practicing, say, controlled hyperventilation, yes, it can be very good for release of emotions, for reset, for releasing trauma, etc. But always understand what is hyperventilation doing. It's not that oxygen is roaming freely throughout the body. This is where the physiology of breathing is very important, because you will feel much more comfortable as an individual if you understand, yes, here's a breathing exercise, but there's a reason behind this breathing exercise. And you have a good indicator of what this breathing exercise is specifically doing to the body. And that's, unfortunately, in the breathing world, there's a lot of breathing exercise put out there. There's no explanation given as to why is this important? What is it really doing? Because I've heard many times, breathe more air. There's more oxygen being delivered throughout the body. That is simply not true. If you want to get increased oxygenation of your body, never breathe more air. Always breathe normal or a little bit less air. And most of us are over breathing anyway. Now, I'm not going to say everybody has dysfunctional breathing patterns, but if we look at, say, people with anxiety, up to 75% of people with anxiety are reported to have some element of dysfunctional breathing. If we look at a paper in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, they looked at 1,933 athletes in Japan. 90% of athletes had dysfunctional breathing from a biomechanical point of view. 30% of people with asthma have dysfunctional breathing. In the normal population, it can range from about 10 to 25%. So dysfunctional breathing, it's not that it's 100%. That's not the case. But the question about dysfunctional breathing, how is it assessed and what dimension was it? So I'm going to open the floor up for some questions. But just before I go to the questions, what I would like you to do is practice this in your own time. Now, we also have 2 apps that are free. One is the Buteyko Clinic app, and it's a very simple app. It's a very accessible app. So there's a chapter for children and a chapter for adults, and there's a lot of useful tools in that. And the other is Oxygen Advantage. Oxygen Advantage is quite a detailed app. We put a huge amount of work and resources into it. It's literally a suite of exercise at your doorstep. Now, we use it a lot with our instructors because, of course, our instructors give talks to corporates. So, say, for example, if an instructor is meeting with a human resource manager, the instructor is talking about an accessible breathing specifically tailored for the corporate environment, for improving sleep quality, reducing rumination, helping to deal with stress and staying composed under pressure. Those are typically the big ones in the corporate environment. The Oxygen Advantage instructor can help the teams and the employees to improve all of those areas. But then when the Oxygen Advantage instructor leaves the company, the employees have the app to continue the practice. So that's what we see it as. The app is an extension of the Oxygen Advantage instructor. But my favourite breathing exercise, it's kind of a nice extension in terms of the exercise that we did earlier on. So earlier on we were saying that whenever you want to tell your brain that you're safe, you take a soft breath in through your nose and a relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. Just softening the breath. You would never breathe that way when you're stressed. When we're stressed, we breathe faster, harder up our chest. We're not getting enough air. The stress breathing is feeding into the stress response. So it's not just that the stress is causing a change to our breathing, but how our breathing changes during stress is going to feed back into the stress. So you get stressed, your breathing changes. We want to dampen that stress response. How do we do that? Don't hyperventilate. Take the soft breath in through the nose and the relaxed and slow, gentle breath out. Now, going one step further with this, how about doing it this way? As you breathe in, instead of breathing 100% of the breath in, Breathe in about 70% of your breath in. And then as you breathe out, bring a total feeling of relaxation to the body and allow the air to leave the body effortlessly. In other words, breathe less air. You know you're breathing less air when you feel air hunger. When you feel air hunger, you know it's due to an accumulation of carbon dioxide in your lungs. When carbon dioxide accumulates in your lungs, it's going to accumulate in the blood leaving the lungs. When carbon dioxide accumulates in the blood leaving the lungs, it improves your blood circulation. So you'll start to notice that your hands are getting warmer. You might notice your feet is getting warmer. You might notice a warmth throughout the human body. By breathing a little bit less air, just as I described there, it's so simple. You're taking a soft breath of air into your nose. Breathing in, we'd say about 70% of your normal breath. In other words, not taking in your normal breath, just taking in about 70% of your normal breath. And then at the top of that, you're bringing a total feeling of relaxation to the body. You want to get air hunger, but not to the point that it gets stressful. You want to feel the same sensation as what you would feel if you're going for a fast walk. It's air hunger, but it's tolerable. Do that for 3 to 4 minutes and see how your body responds to it. Surrender to the sensation of air hunger. Does the temperature of your hands increase? Do the temperature of your feet improve? Do you feel a little bit drowsy, indicating that it's activating the rest response? Do you notice any change in the saliva in the mouth? Normally we experience increased water saliva in the mouth. The body responds by activating the digest response. We don't always need to be stressing ourselves in today's modern life. Most of us actually need to do the opposite. We need to be dampening the stress response. We already have enough stressors. We need to be talking about recovery. We need to be talking about self-regulation. We need to be talking about balancing the nervous system and improving sleep quality. We need to be talking about all of the foundational stuff that we need to apply and practice to help to look after ourselves. Yes, of course, hormetic stresses are good. The body causes adaptations. But we can't just be practicing a hormetic stress and ignoring the foundational stuff. And for many people, if they have poor foundational breathing and they are practicing hormetic stressors, that's not going to have a positive adaptation. They're going to overdo it. So you always have to look at, whenever you're practicing a breathing technique, is this breathing technique or exercise specifically targeted to what you want to get out of it? For example, if you're a person with asthma, person with anxiety, person with panic disorder, person with sleep, or an athlete, or in the corporate world. Number 2 is it targeted according to your state of health? Because, of course, some states of health, breathing could have a detrimental effect on. Is it targeted according to your age? Is it targeted according to your breathing pattern? And it's not that I want to make it more complex. Breathing is simple and complex at the same time. How well do you breathe? How well do your students breathe? And if you want to become either a Buteyko clinic instructor or an oxygen advantage instructor, use the code BLACK20 and that will give you a 20% reduction off. And I think it lasts only until midnight tonight. So there's only kind of a window there of about 11 hours or so. So let's have a look at your questions and I'll do my best. So one question is, what's the difference between Oxygen Advantage and Buteyko? I kind of went through this at the start. So always think about Buteyko is, think about the clients that you work with. Buteyko is all about health. You know, it's all about sleep, respiration, mental health, and working with children. Oxygen Advantage is all about performance. So mental and physical performance. And that's encompassing body, mind, and sport. So those 3 pillars. So that's the main difference between the 2. Now there's some crossover, of course, but at the same time they're quite different in their delivery. The second question that's in, how do I know which certificate? Well, I think I kind of answered that as well, because that will all depend on who do you work with. And the other thing that I would say is, if you're in the health and wellness industry or in the fitness industry, it's useful to pay attention to how your students are breathing. You know, are they breathing? Are they coming into you with their mouths open? Do they have disproportionate breathlessness? Are they all over the place in terms of their capacity to concentrate? Do you see frequent sighing? Or maybe they're stopping breath at different times throughout the day. Do you see faster breathing? A little bit faster. Not that they are having a panic attack. Do you see them breathing more in the upper chest? That breathing pattern is going to hold your client back. So whether you're working in mental health or sleep or respiration or performance, breathing is a really important function. The next question that is in terms of, yes, on the Buteyko, not to cause any confusion. So the standard Buteyko training is something that we've been providing since 2005. And that's the general Buteyko training. And it does look at asthma, sleep, mental health, working with adults and children. That's the standard normal Buteyko certificate. We have now launched also psychophysiological breath training. And this is a deep dive from mental health for psychologists, for psychotherapists, for psychiatrists, for counsellors, for any person who is interested in the application of breathing training for mental health, because it really goes hand in hand with, say, for example, mindfulness. I often feel that when I was looking at my clients and they were coming in with a lot of angst in the mind, and they had trouble sleeping, and they had poor breathing patterns, and then they would practice mindfulness, which is a tremendous tool. But the problem there is that their underlying breathing was not good. Their sleep was not good. Now, would mindfulness address dysfunctional breathing? And I don't think it is going to. And the reason being is because if you have an individual who is breathing fast in the upper chest, breathing through an open mouth, and feeling air hunger, mindfulness is not going to target breathing. So, of course, there's a place for mindfulness. But when you bring in breathing training that's targeted for mental health with mindfulness, now you're really bringing two cogs that are very, very important in terms of reducing rumination of the mind, reducing overthinking, and of course improving happiness. Which of the books should I start off with? I have 11 books. I suppose it will depend. I have a new book out, which is The Breathing Cure for Sleep, which is a really deep dive for sleep. Could make a great Christmas gift. I have also got a book, Breathing for Yoga. So say, for example, if you're a yoga instructor or a Pilates instructor, this is bringing the science into breathing for yoga. And the interesting thing about breathing for yoga is that it changed in around 1880. Original yogis, yogi masters of old, of days gone by, they understood about the importance of breathing light, about breathing less air, about conservation of the breath. And it was standard practice that they would have a very long breath hold time. They could stop breathing for 1, 2, 3 minutes. They could slow down the respiratory rate to 1 normal breath per minute. So that would imply that they had tremendous conservation of the breath, and that they had great CO2 tolerance, which is very important. You want to have high carbon dioxide tolerance, because if you're overly sensitive to the accumulation of carbon dioxide, your breathing is going to be that bit faster and harder, and you feel you're not getting enough air. Oxygen is not the primary driver of breathing. It's carbon dioxide. And the question to ask is, what's your sensitivity to carbon dioxide? And of course, the other thing to ask is, males and females do breathe differently. And that was identified back in 1915. So there's always nuances to take into consideration. But anyway, breathing for yoga. There's also The Breathing Cure, which is a deep dive in health. Atomic Focus, I actually like that book because it brings together all of the elements in terms of training the brain. And, by the name of it, Atomic Focus. So it looks at concentration, it looks at attention span, but it's very practical. It's quite a simple book, but it's a very accessible book. And then there's The Oxygen Advantage, which is a bestseller. That was written back in 2014, and that's all about mental and physical performance. And of course, that was the book that started the whole Oxygen Advantage. It took me about 4 years to write it, but I got there in the end, and it's out there. And the stuff is still absolutely applicable today, 11 years on. So it was a book ahead of its time. And the other books are Close Your Mouth, Mouth Breather, Buteyko Meets Dr. Mew, Asthma Free Naturally, Anxiety Free Naturally. So yeah, there's quite a few books out there. So it really depends what you want to get out of it. But everything is in the books. I always don't hold anything back. You see them, they're quite chunky. The science is in there and the techniques are in there. Do I need to have read the Oxygen Advantage book? I actually think if you've read a book, it gives you an insight into it. You know, you might say, well, I don't like reading books. Well, there's audio books available. You also have the apps. You know, the apps are pretty good because there's a lot of information, especially the Oxygen Advantage app. So there's a number of places that you could start here. I have many podcasts. You'll find it both Buteyko Clinic channel and also an Oxygen Advantage channel. You know, so there's so many different ways of learning the Buteyko Clinic method for yourself and Oxygen Advantage for yourself. You have YouTube, you have Instagram, you have the books, you have the apps, you have our online courses, and then of course if you want to do a deep dive and become an instructor, you have instructor training as well. So plenty of opportunities. Is there any more questions?
Yeah.
What kind of support do instructors get once they complete your... Okay. We have quite a team here. We have about 14 full-time, well, we've more, we've 18 people in full-time. So we have refreshers every month. And once a person signs up for the online training, so say for example, the next online training with Buteyko is in January, and the next online training for Oxygen Advantage is in February. However, if you signed up today, you get access to all of the materials anyway. And you will be able to access the recordings from the trainings that I did last month. So I typically do a Buteyko training every few months and an Oxygen Advantage training every few months. And when you attend one, then you can come back for the next one. You can come back for the next one. So say for example, the training that will be Buteyko in February online, we will have instructors that have done our training back in July and even back in 2023 and 2022. Why did they come back? Because breathing is an evolving field. And oftentimes you learn as you go. You're never going to learn something straight off in one, stream of, say, for example, 7 or 8 days. You're going to get a good insight into it. And then you're going to start working with your clients. And then you'll start understanding, okay, I need to pick up more on this. And I'm a little bit unsure of this. And that's when you come back to the trainings again. There's no extra cost. So, and I would also say that the price that we charge is really accessible. You also have a full-time member of staff, our team, who looks after the instructors all the time. All you have to do is send an email, certify@buteykoclinic.com or certify@oxygenadvantage.com. It's a full-time person always looking after the instructors. So what support is there? You're welcome to come back. First of all, you have a really in-depth training portal. We also do online courses that you're welcome to come back as repeats. There's no extra charge. And we also have a monthly refresher. So that's with the Buteyko training and the Oxygen Advantage. Are the Buteyko belts also on the Black Friday? I think they are. How do I know what size to get? Okay, so basically for men, it would be I don't have one to show you as a demonstration, but the Buteyko belt is something that sits in the midriff here. So we have our diaphragm here, and people don't always have a good perception of their breathing. Now, a true deep breath would be, you're putting your hand here, and as you breathe in, can you push your hands outwards? As you breathe out, do you feel your hands moving inwards? So the Buteyko belt is an elasticated belt that you set the resistance on the straps. And say for a female, you wear it just underneath the bra, and for a man, you're just wearing it and it's encompassing the diaphragm area here. Large is typically men, unless you have a narrower man, of course, and medium and small is more so females. But yeah, I can't give you dimensions, but I think it's on our website. Any more?
Yeah.
Do you do breathwork meditations? Yes, we do. So, for example, you can access a few. I think breathwork meditations are amazing, and we have already quite a number of them that are recorded. You can check them out yourself. Go to buteykoclinic.com, and when you go to the top part of the website, go to resources, then scroll down to Sleep Hub. When you click on Sleep Hub, you'll find different meditations there that are recorded. So very much for sleep, but also rest and reset during the day. So we've been using meditations for about 15-20 years, and I think they're fundamentally important. But we also have to consider your everyday breathing patterns. How are you breathing all of the time? Because you will find that, the meditation, of course, it plays a tremendous role. But think of your everyday breathing. And it's not about becoming obsessed. It's really about understanding what is functional breathing and what is dysfunctional breathing, and working to improve your everyday breathing. And you can also check in how well you breathe. So, for example, Rory Darkins, he published quite a new questionnaire, which I think is brilliant, and it's called Perceived Breath Mastery. So you'll find it online, Perceived Breath Mastery, and fill it in and see where you are, and then 4 weeks later see where you are. Now, of course, we use other tools, Control Pause, Bolt Score, and Nijmegen questionnaire, self-evaluation of breathing questionnaire. We have our own questionnaires. We also have questionnaires for children, because we want to make sure that we're never forcing nasal breathing with a child, just in case a child has enlarged adenoid. So, it's important. Know how you breathe and know how your client is breathing. For me, it doesn't make sense teaching somebody a breathing exercise if you don't know how well they are breathing in the first place. Because that's it, that's breathing. Improve breathing patterns. How does breathing through the nose lead to diaphragm breathing, which is considered better? Yeah, this is very understudied. This is just something that we would have noticed over the years. There are a couple of papers looking at it. I can't think of the authors now right at this moment. I think one is Travison. But basically what they did was they looked at the recruitment of the diaphragm with nasal breathing versus mouth breathing. And when you breathe in and out through the nose, you typically have a better recruitment of the diaphragm. Do this demonstration. Look down at your chest and breathe through your mouth. So if I look down at my chest and breathe through the mouth, I'm going to be breathing more upper chest. So it is something that we would see over and over and over and over. We also see that people coming in with persistent mouth breathing tend to breathe in the upper chest. The other factor that's causing more upper chest breathing is that when you feel that you're not getting enough air. And here's the point here as well. If you're doing Pilates or yoga or physiotherapy or physical therapy, and if you want to achieve good recruitment of the diaphragm, you have to ask what are the factors that are causing you to breathe upper chest in the first place. Okay, you could be slouching all day, that's one. Text neck, of course, with mobile phones is two. Mouth breathing, though, is a big one that often gets overlooked, is three. And if you have a strong drive to breathe, so if you have a strong chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide, that's number four. So if you want to achieve good and optimal recruitment of the diaphragm, we have to look at breathing in and out through the nose, and we also have to look at what's your chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide. Because if you have an individual who feels that they are not getting enough air, has faster breathing, that they have a ratio of the breath in to the breath out is 1:1, that they don't have natural pauses, that person is inevitably going to breathe in the upper chest. Why? Because this is the way we breathe when we feel that we are not getting enough air. It's almost that we're breathing upper chest to try and compensate for the sensation of air hunger. But the problem with upper chest breathing is it's so inefficient, it's so uneconomical. It's really high energy. We waste a lot of energy breathing in the upper chest. We waste a lot of air to dead space. It reduces alveolar ventilation. And also we're not getting the benefits of the optimal recruitment of the diaphragm. This breathing muscle here isn't just for respiration, it provides stabilization of the spine. And 50% of people with lower back pain have poor breathing from a biomechanical point of view. So is it the lower back pain that's causing poor breathing from a biomechanical point of view, or is it poor breathing from a biomechanical point of view, meaning the person is breathing more in the upper chest, they don't have the same generation of intra-abdominal pressure, they've reduced stabilization of the spine, and that in turn then is feeding into lower back pain. And it's likely it's going to be a vicious cycle. With many of these things, you have a vicious cycle going on. Why do I have more trouble exhale lengthening compared to inhaling? So this would be, say for example, we would see this more commonly with, there's a couple of reasons here. One is that there can be some degree of stress and anxiety, and as a result the person is breathing relatively fast. So when we're talking about a normal breath, as we breathe in, we'll say the ratio of the breath in is 1, but the ratio of the breath out should be about 1.5. So the breath out during rest should be slow and prolonged because it's more passive. you have the natural recoil of the diaphragm, the intercostal muscles coming inwards, and the air is simply leaving the body on the exhalation. But say, for example, you have a person that's breathing in fast and breathing out fast. That could be, I would start off it can be a biochemical issue, or it can be a biomechanical issue, or it could be a psychophysiological issue. So where would we start? I would start off with how can I improve that person's breathing from a biochemical point of view? Why are they breathing so fast? Why do they have a strong drive to breathe? And if you talk to them, they will tell you, I just feel I can't take a deep breath. So I would give them little exercises tailored to that person to help improve their breathing from a biochemical point of view by reducing their sensitivity to carbon dioxide. Now, those exercises can involve small breath holds while walking, breathing recovery walking with the mouth closed, any physical movement with the mouth closed, breathing light, relaxation. So there's a number of exercises that you can do that are very accessible. From a biomechanical point of view, once I've felt that I'm making progress from a biochemical point of view, then I will start recruiting the diaphragm. So we have a number of different breathing exercises to help improve recruitment of the diaphragm. And those would be the two main areas that I would focus on. So start off with nasal breathing. And you could start off with, I wouldn't necessarily do slow breathing. And the reason being is because, say for example, we'll say you're breathing 20 breaths per minute, which indicates that you have a breath every 3 seconds. So one breath cycle is 3 seconds. And I'd say the ratio is 1 to 1. So you're breathing in for about 1.5 seconds, you're breathing out for about 1.5 seconds. Okay, if you start slowing down your breathing, so say you go to a therapist and the therapist says, your breathing is much too fast, you're breathing 20 breaths per minute, I need you to be breathing 12 breaths per minute. Okay, on the face of it, the advice seems fine, but it's not taking into consideration why are you breathing 20 breaths per minute. And also, if you just practice breathing down to 12 breaths per minute, you're not going to address the factors that are causing you to breathe 20 breaths per minute. I want to go direct. Why is this person breathing 20 breaths per minute? They feel that they can't have a normal relaxed exhalation. It could be, as I said, biochemical or biomechanical, but we need to get to those factors. The respiratory rate looks after itself. If you improve your breathing patterns, the respiratory rate looks after itself. You cannot address breathing by focusing solely on the respiratory rate, because number one, it doesn't take into consideration tidal volume. It's not taking into consideration whether you're breathing nose or mouth. It's not taking into consideration your everyday breathing patterns. It's not taking into consideration your breathing from a biomechanical point of view. So that's why I'm not always a fan of, say, 4-7-8 or breathing in for 4, out for 6, or the physiological sigh. Of course, all of those little techniques help in the moment. I'm more interested, can we improve that person's everyday breathing? Can we improve their breathing to the point that they feel comfortable with their breathing, that their breathing is effortless? Because that's ultimately where it is at with breathing. Next question. How do you stop snoring even if your mouth is closed at night? Okay, there's two main forms of snoring. One is mouth snoring, which goes like this. That stops once you get your mouth closed at night. You cannot mouth snore say that one again. You cannot snore through your mouth if you're breathing solely through your nose. In order to snore through your mouth, you have to breathe through your mouth. If you get your mouth closed and all of your breathing is through the nose, mouth snoring stops. So we can say with confidence, we can stop mouth snoring, which is likely to be the most common form of snoring. We can stop it 100%. Nasal snoring is when you can have a restricted airway. So you might have a smaller nasal airway, you might have a deviated septum, you might have allergic rhinitis. And it's not just about the nasal airway, it's also about how hard and fast you breathe. So a nasal snoring is turbulence in the nasal cavity, but also where the nasal cavity meets the throat, the nasopharynx. Nasal snoring goes like this. So it's quite nasally, obviously, yeah? So we give you techniques to help open up your nose. So this reduces resistance to breathing. But we also give you techniques to help normalize your breathing. So when your breathing is soft and slow and gentle, now there's less turbulent airflow. So you have to think about the nasal airway like a pipe. Number one is what is the diameter of the pipe. But number two is what's expected to go through it. And if your breathing is relatively hard and fast, you're going to have more resistance to your breathing, more turbulent airflow, and greater difficulty with that air getting from the nose into your lungs. So yes, we do want to open up the nose, but number 2 is we also want to normalize breathing volume. We can help to significantly reduce snoring through the nose, but we may not stop it. That's the thing. We can stop mouth snoring. We can't always stop nose snoring, because nasal snoring is airway and breathing flow. Next question. So I think we're coming to an end, actually. So in terms of, say thanks very much for joining, and I hope you got something out of that. I'm a tremendous fan of breathing. I will say it's an amazing tool that you have, and once you learn it, you have it for the rest of your life. I can't understand why it's not widely embraced out there, but I am going to make a couple of predictions. In the 23 years that I'm in this field full time, I have seen massive inroads in breathing. This is not just a honeymoon. Breathing training is here to stay, and I can see it really going mainstream. So that's my prediction in the next 5 years. In sports, in corporate life, in mental health, in sleep health, and in respiration. It's already started. You know, we were seen on the fringes when we were adopting nasal breathing and mouth taping back in 2002. People thought it was so odd, but we kept with it because we saw the results. So we were the pioneers of breathing in and out through the nose. You can look at a book that I wrote back in 2003 called Close Your Mouth. And if you were to read that book, Close Your Mouth, which is published 22 years ago, you would see mouth taping in it. All the things that we still talk about, but of course much better detail. So I would say to you, breathing is an amazing function. Go deep into it. It's not just about saying to somebody, take a deep breath and thinking that's breathing. That's nothing. That's scratching the surface. In actual fact, it could do more harm than good. So if you are wanting to become a breathing instructor, either Buteyko Clinic, which is all about health, or Oxygen Advantage, which is about performance, the code is Black20 and it lasts up until midnight tonight. So the best of luck and enjoy your day, and remember, breathe in and out through your nose, and even just practice one of those little techniques we went through today. Even when things are going good, you know, tell your brain that you're safe. Take a soft breath in through your nose, and a relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. Breathing is silent, in and out through the nose, nothing for anybody to see. So you can see it as your secret weapon to self-regulate. So enjoy your day. Thanks.